All right, let's talk about something that I think almost everyone has felt at some point, that deeply frustrating feeling of just being stuck. Today, we're going to break down the psychology of why this happens, and more importantly, we're going to map out a clear path to start moving forward again.
You know that feeling, right? Where you're busy, you feel like you're putting in the effort, but when you actually stop and look back, you realize you haven't really gone anywhere. If that sounds even a little bit familiar, then you are in exactly the right place. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's not some big dramatic crisis. You're not a failure. It's this weird in-between space, this limbo where progress just seems to have ground to a halt. So, first things first, we've got to reframe this feeling. We tend to blame ourselves, right? We think, oh, I'm just lazy or I lack ambition. But that's not what the research shows. This is a recognized psychological state, not some kind of personal flaw. And it's so sneaky. It's this slow drift that's the real killer. Time just keeps ticking by, and that gap between where you are and where you want to be just seems to get wider and wider, even though you can't really point to any one big mistake. So, what is actually going on in our minds when we feel this way? Well, it turns out there are some pretty specific psychological reasons we get paralyzed. Let's dig into the first one, which is the surprising danger of things being just okay.
This is something called the comfort crisis. And honestly, the best way to think about it is to imagine you're sitting in a slightly uncomfortable chair. It's not so bad that it forces you to get up, but it's definitely not comfortable enough for you to actually relax. So you just sit there, kind of annoyed, knowing something isn't right.
And this is what's so wild. A truly terrible situation, like getting laid off or going through a bad breakup, it lights a fire under you. It forces you to act. But an okay job, an okay relationship, that's where we get into trouble. That's where we drift, because there's no emergency forcing us to make a change. Okay, the second big reason is a paradox of our modern lives. We have more options than any other generation in history. I mean, you can learn anything, move anywhere, start any kind of business. And on the surface, that sounds like pure freedom. But in reality, it can be absolutely paralyzing.
And this leads directly to what psychologists call choice paralysis. When you're staring at 100 different paths you could take, the fear of picking the wrong one can be so intense that the safest feeling option is to just pick none of them. So we stay exactly where we are, telling ourselves we're just thinking things through.
And let's be really honest with ourselves for a second. All that stuff we say about waiting for the perfect moment or I just need to do a little more research, what are we really doing? We're avoiding the discomfort of actually committing to one thing. And what's hiding underneath all that avoidance? It's this deep, deep fear of irreversibility. It's this belief that if you pick one door to walk through, all the other doors will slam shut and lock behind you forever. And that feels like a huge, high-stakes, final decision. But here's the hard truth. You literally can't walk through 5 doors at the same time. And this is so crucial. Moving forward in any direction means you have to say no to other directions, at least for now. Progress actually demands that we close some doors so we can finally walk through one. Okay, so understanding the psychology is one thing, but how do we actually, break free? Let's walk through a super practical framework for creating movement. And the best part is, it doesn't rely on waiting for that magical feeling of motivation to strike. If you're stuck in your head, the solution isn't to just think harder. You can't plan your way out of paralysis. The only way out is through action. Real, tangible movement, no matter how small.
This framework is incredibly simple, and it's built on 3 key ideas. First, shrink the action. What's the smallest possible version of movement? Not quit my job, but spend 30 minutes researching one new career. Second, give it a time limit. You're not deciding for forever. You're just running a 30-day experiment. This takes all the pressure off. And third, and this might be the most important, accept imperfect action. The goal here isn't a masterpiece. The goal is just to move.
You will learn so much more about whether you want to be a writer by writing one really bad page than you ever will from reading 10 books about writing. Clarity isn't something you find by thinking, it's something you create by doing. So the final piece of this whole puzzle isn't another tactic or a to-do list. It's about a fundamental shift in how you see this feeling of being stuck in the first place.
Feeling stuck is not evidence that you're failing. Think of it as a signal. It's like the check engine light in your car. It's just your brain's way of telling you, hey, what we're doing right now isn't quite aligned with where we really want to go. That's not failure. That's useful information.
And please, if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. You are not broken, you are not lazy, and you are not behind. You are simply in a very common psychological state that has a very clear, actionable way out. And what's so cool is that once you take that first step, you kick off this amazing positive feedback loop. That tiny bit of movement creates a little bit of clarity. That clarity builds a tiny bit of confidence. And that confidence makes the next bit of movement just a little bit easier. That is how real momentum is built.
So I'll leave you with this question. Not, how are you going to change your entire life? That's way too big. It's much smaller. What is one tiny, imperfect step you can take this week to create just a little bit of movement? The answer to that question, that's where your journey forward really begins.